go. The next part of the picture, I could, in theory, draw like this. That the component teams create code and it comes together. But that misrepresents the situation. So I'm not going to draw it that way. Why? For at least two reasons. The first is that, as you can see from this picture, there's competing priorities for different component tasks and different components. So there's no guarantee that on October 1 at 9 a.m. that this team and this team are working on their tasks of F1. This team might be working on their task of F1. This team might be working on their task of F7 because the components the priorities start to get out of order. A second problem is the following. Why this picture misrepresents. Get rid of that noise. Because there's not just F1 flowing through the system, there's that. And consequently, there's queues in front of all these people. There's multiple artifacts. Now I want to get to the second reason why this picture misrepresents. Consider these component tasks. Is each one of them exactly 27 person hours? Of course not. This one for their component task of F1 might be 27 person hours. This one for their component task of the same feature could be 100 person hours, etc. And now to the key point. For both of these reasons, the work starts to get done asynchronously. So that if I check at 9 a.m. on Monday, are they all working in lockstep on exactly their related part of the same feature? The answer is absolutely unlikely for several reasons. And this picture incorrectly suggests that the code is coming together and being integrated. But because the teams are working on disparate code or disconnected code, so for example, at 9 a.m. on Monday, this team could be making a call to calling Operation 1 on this component, but because the teams are not working in lockstep, there's no guarantee that Operation 1 is there. So question, if you work as a developer, how do you resolve that kind of a delayed integration problem? Well, you typically use branches or stubs. Those are the two mechanisms that you would normally use. And as a result, what you have is what's called delayed integration. Now, I know that virtually everybody in the room here has heard of the phrase continuous integration. But not everybody knows the surprising meaning. I've learned over the years that some people find this surprising, the real meaning of continuous integration. Continuous integration means to integrate continuously. So I go to various groups and I ask, are you doing continuous integration? And you know what they say to me? They say, yes, we have Jenkins. In other words, they've conflated a build server with the behavior of integrating continuously. You can have 1,000 build servers running at the speed of light, but if you don't have the programmer behavior of integrating the code continuously, you have delayed integration. You can quickly spot someone who doesn't understand the idea if they start talking about build servers instead of behavior. So therefore, a much better visualization of what's going on is this, that the component teams are making their code separately. We have delayed integration, and that means at some point we do have to resolve it. How are we going to do that? Which of the 9 component teams is going to be responsible for the complete end-to-end integration? It's not clear. Let's introduce a new role. And this role traditionally has been called release manager. And they'll often take the responsibility of pulling all the code together. So the code eventually comes together. Does this happen smoothly? No. And in fact, the longer the delay, the more problems there will be, which means there'll be a source of unplanned interruption back into the teams. Now, it's time to do the end-to-end testing. Which component team should be responsible for the end-to-end testing? Not clear. Let's add a new role called system testers. And of course, there will be problems, and that will lead to other unplanned interruptions back into the teams. Finally, notice that the work has gotten divided up across a lot of different groups. So there's a kind of coordination problem and tracking or ability to see what's going on problem. How are we going to solve that problem? Let's introduce a new role. And so this role is usually called project manager, although actually I think it better appropriately would be called something like a feature manager or something like that. Now, before we go further, I want to just pause and help you see a couple of things. In process terminology, this is called a sequential life cycle. And notice that if you have component teams, it must give birth to a sequential life cycle. Another thing to notice is that if you were to ask the question, what is this organization demonstrating? If you were to ask a bunch of managers, they might say, well, Craig, we're set up for high agility, fast time to market, and working on highest value. But if you actually reflect upon what's going on here, it's pretty easy to demonstrate that this is associated with long cycle time rather than short cycle time. I can explore with you the both empirical and sort of queuing theory view of that. So it's not consistent with low cycle time. How about is it consistent with agility or adaptiveness, the ability to change direction cheaply? Well, as you can probably kind of obviously guess, this is hardly associated with the ability to adapt or change direction easily. If suddenly you come in with new knowledge and you want to change direction, is a large overhead. There's a high switching cost. So it's not consistent with adaptiveness either. And nor is it consistent with working on highest value. And this one needs a little bit of a sketch to make clear. Imagine we have a list of requirements, and imagine that they were sorted by highest customer value, whatever that means. We'll table that problem for now. And because we're talking about multiple components involved, we could ask and answer the question, for this list of customer requirements sorted by customer value, what components are touched? For example, C2, C4, C6, C1, C3, C5, C1, C2, and C11. C11. Now, let's run a quick thought experiment. Imagine the group says they're going to be working by highest customer value. And secondly, imagine that according to their very best estimate, it's going to be at least 6 months before they can start working on number 33. And third, let's assume that number 33 is the first customer requirement that touches the component C11. And it's going to be 6 months before they can start working on that. Now, in this story, the CEO comes to the development group, and it's day one of this story, and the CEO asks, hey, hey, where's the C11 team room? She learns it. She goes to the C11 team room. This is day one of this story. She opens the door. There's no programmers there. And so she goes to the development manager and says, hey, where's the C11 programmers? And the manager says, well, we estimate that it's going to be at least 6 months for the time for them to do their task on number 33, so I've asked them to go on vacation for the next 6 months. So does she say, wow, that's a great idea? Or does she say, no, 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 I want them to be busy? Of course, she says the second. So on the first day of this organization, what requirement does the C11 team work on? They work on number 33. In other words, this is not an organization working on highest value. This is an organization that's essentially optimized for busyness, not for low cycle time, not for adaptiveness. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is that the group decides that they need to improve. And so they decide to go to a course on scaling Agile. And after they come back, they go through a deep and profound transformation to a new organizational model where everything is better. I want to show you the new organizational model, the scaling Agile model. First of all, they introduce product owners. And they write epics. Then they introduce Agile architects, and they write architectural epics. They've done a radical transformation by introducing team product owners who write stories. They now have Scrum teams. They've done a deep change, so now they have DevOps. And they now have Agile system testers and, of course, Scrum masters. And now there's been a profound change of the organization. Thank you for your time.